This video is about the differences between pipeline strategies and platform strategies. Again, it is taken from the book Platform Revolution, which I used to require as required reading for this course. So when we look at the differences between pipeline and platform strategies, what do we see? And what do we call, again, a pipeline strategy or a pipeline business model? The pipeline business model is that linear business model, that business model that is basically built upon the value chain. And so you have inputs, you have transformation of those inputs, then you have outputs, then you have distribution, and then you have after sales support. So those are the primary activities of your value chain. And so that those companies that are concerned primarily with the value chain, the linear business model, that pipeline model, what does it concern itself with? It's by optimizing those value chain activities. So optimizing the activity of inbound logistics, for example. How do we get those raw materials in and everything that is involved with getting those raw materials in so that we can then have operations to transform those raw materials either into a finished product or into a component that we will sell to another firm to create its finished product. And then how do we distribute? How do we take that component or that finished product that we have and get it out to our customers? So those linear businesses, those pipeline businesses, they are looking at how do they optimize, how do they make more efficient, how do they make more profitable each individual link in that particular value chain. And so those critical assets are internal assets. They are assets that are owned or controlled by the firm. They are assets that show on the balance sheet. So those raw materials show on the balance sheets. So that is in the machinery, the manufacturing process is not shown on the balance sheet, but the machines to manufacture those particular products are shown on the balance sheet. And so the focus is on internal resources and the internal processes that increase customer value. However, a platform business is a network business. So the network business is completely different. The focus on the network business is different. The focus is on increasing the network effect. So increasing the number of members that are actually on the platform itself, and how do we bring together those consumers and those producers on the platform for high value exchanges. And again, the value exchange may not be so much something that you pay for. So what is it that you are paying for that Uber? What is it that ride? What is it that you are paying to listen to an influencer on YouTube, for example? So the focus there is bringing together the users and bringing together the producers in a particular exchange of information or data. And so those critical assets are actually external. They are no longer internal. The critical assets are the community of members, the community resources, the community information, the community interactions. So it is the community itself that is important, that is valuable, and not the individual pieces, not those raw materials, not those manufacturing processes, not that distribution of the product. So the focus there for a network business is actually how do we facilitate, how do we increase external interactions to do what? To create network effects that are going to maximize the total ecosystem value and not to maximize the internal customer value. So when we look at pipelines and platforms, how do they create value? So the pipelines are creating value by optimizing the value chain activities, as we mentioned, and controlling those very scarce, valuable, inimitable, tangible, and intangible resources. So we want to build a moat. That's what Porter talks about, is building a moat around your business. The platforms, on the other hand, do what? They create value by facilitating an exchange of information. Bam, 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 bam. So they want to build that community. And so it is the exchange and how easy it is to exchange that information among the different members of the community, among the producers, among the consumers. That is the value. So pipelines seek to maximize the lifetime value of an individual customer, that individual customer that is doing what? That is buying your product or your service. Whereas the platform wants to maximize value by continuously doing what? Growing that ecosystem larger and larger and larger and larger and larger and larger. So growing the number of members, users, producers on that ecosystem so that you have more and more and more and more and more exchanges. And so the focus tends to be on the supply side, what I can give to you, whereas the focus is on the demand side, what can I, as the consumer, what can I get from that? So that is the difference there between those two strategies. And when we look at the economics of it, again, the supply side economies and the demand side economies of scale. When we think of economics, what do we think of? Economics here is, we have an example of a definition is the study of scarcity, the study of how people use resources and respond to incentives, the study of decision making. Well, when we look at our supply side, when it comes to understanding how are people using resources and responding to incentives, the supply side is different from the demand side. So on the supply side, what is it that we're doing? These are the linear pipeline models where we have high fixed cost and low marginal cost. Those require a high sales volume. So the more that you sell, what does that allow you to do? That your individual per unit costs are lower. So those individual per unit costs allow, because you are producing so many of them, allow you to have a low price. Those low prices for the per unit cost do what? Allow the sales to increase, because everyone wants to buy that lower priced item, which allows you to do what? To produce more of them, which again allows you to lower that per unit cost. And so it is just a continuous cycle. And the focus there is on the sale of owned, notice owned being the key word here, owned goods and services. So our focus is on what the pipeline company, what the linear business model company, what they own, what is in their balance sheet. The difference, however, is for network companies. So networks, what do they want? They need technology. So number one, they're a technology company, or at least incorporating technology into what? An efficient meaning quick, and efficient network. And so that efficient network allows a greater match between the producers and the consumers. So what does that do? Is that allows you to get more producers and more consumers and more producers and more consumers. So your network is expanding, which allows you to have more and more transactions. So instead of you going on to Uber to see when you are going to get your car to take you to your next destination, instead of there being one car or two cars or no cars, you've actually got 10 cars that are right there. So that is the value. So the more cars that you have, the more valuable Uber is to you, because the greater your choice, and it allows you to choose when and where you want that choice. And so that is a function of the producers, who are the car drivers, and a function of the consumers. If you did not have very many producers, car drivers, you would not have very many consumers, people who wanted to ride. If you don't have very many people who want to ride, you don't have very many car drivers. So the increase of one increases the other. And so what we see is that companies that are network companies, that are not pipeline, but are platform companies, they may subsidize one area so that they can get an increase in the second area. And you say, well, what do you mean by that? They may give, I don't know if y'all have used Lyft here. I used Lyft when I was in Dallas from time to time. Lyft would give a $10, not deduction, but it basically deducted $10 from your bill, but give like a rebate. It wasn't a rebate. You didn't have to write in and ask for it. What they did is that they basically took off $10 of your bill for the first 10 rides, perhaps, that you had to take. So instead of your bill being $15, for example, you actually paid only $5. You didn't have to do anything to it. Lyft let you know that you had that discount, that's the word, had that discount there. And so it did not hurt the drivers, but what did it do? It increased the number of riders who were the consumers. And because the consumers have increased, what does that do? Is that increases the number of drivers. So what is it that efficiency in networking does? It allows a better match between the producer and the consumer, which allows for more volume between them and greater value, because you have that confidence that there will be that Uber out there when you get ready to go to your destination. You're confident that car driver will be there. So the focus here is on the exchange. So the exchange of value, which is the interaction there. So that is the focus, not on what is owned, because again, Uber does not own those cars. Airbnb does not own those accommodations that you're actually staying in. So when we look at Porter, how does this compare to what we have learned about Porter from a supplier and buyer power? So the supply side, the linear business, the pipeline business, views external forces as depletive, means taking away from your particular power. So you want to minimize the power of the supplier. And so Porter's view there, or a pipeline view, is saying that the external forces actually take away value from the firm, and it is supplier power and buyer power are viewed as threats, and that boundary between the two are pretty fixed. Well, that's flipped on its head when we think of platforms. So platform being the demand side, platform being the network business, that it's all about the ecosystem. And so platform business, network business, views external forces as accretive, as growing, as expanding. So the more producers you have, the more consumers you have. So it increases the value of the platform. The larger the membership is, the more valuable the platform is. Who, if you are a YouTube person and you are adding value with your YouTube videos, so you have YouTube videos of people who want to talk about stocks, or some young guy who's in his early 20s and he's talking about stocks, and you've got somebody else who's talking about journaling, and you've got somebody else who, Kylie Jenner, for example, I don't know how many millions and millions and millions of subscribers that she has to her YouTube channel, and she's making huge amounts of money because that network, that group of members is so huge, and they can get money from the ad revenue. So that supplier power and buyer power, those producers and consumers, she being the producer there, those are what is viewed as the assets, not the physical piece or the particular service that is owned. And so the boundaries there are always shifting, or may shift, for example. So again, you may be a rider one day in an Uber car, and you may decide to be a driver the next day. You may be a viewer of a YouTube video one day, and you may decide to create your own YouTube videos, to create your own channel. You may have your own niche, and so therefore your network grows. Why does everyone ask you to smash that like button or smash that subscribe button so that you can do what? So that they can increase their network, increase their membership, but as well so that you can do what? What do you want? You like the YouTube channel. You want to find out whenever they place a new YouTube video on. It might be 4 o'clock in the morning. It might be 7 o'clock in the morning. It might be 3 o'clock in the afternoon, but you get notified when there is new content. So that makes it, you don't have to keep looking and looking and looking. No, you get notified easy. You get notified for free that there's new content out there that you love and that you like it. And so then they get more money because you've liked it and because you've watched it all the way through. So that whole increase there is what allows those platforms to be more and more valuable. And then finally, what we look at is the difference in the thinking. So linear pipeline thinking versus network platform thinking. So the thinking for the pipeline is what? Our users interact with our software that we create, and our product, our software, is valuable in and of itself. So that's where we're deriving our value. That's why we are getting that value from those scarce resources that we own, that we want to make sure that we keep everyone else out, that we want to minimize that threat of entry, that we want to minimize the bargaining power of the supplier and as well of the buyer, because we are trying to keep that value from our software that we have created in that particular example. Platforms, on the other hand, do what? They say, look, our users are interacting with each other using the software that we have created, but our software in and of itself has zero value unless the users are using it. So unless we've got people there that are using our software has no value whatsoever. So the pipeline thinker says, look, we are creating, or we are charging our consumer. We ask our consumer to pay for the value that we have created. But the platform thinkers say what? we've got to figure out who's creating this value and how are we going to charge for that value. So that is looking at how is the owner of the platform, the one who owns this, how are they going to derive value or profit from the individual apps that are on our device and from the consumers that are using those individual apps. And again, the app might be free. So there's a complete difference in thinking between a linear pipeline model company and a network platform company.